Jules, the reason I find Vini so frustrating is that, and maybe it's in my DNA. I like tactical order. I like things that make sense. And in many situations, he does not make sense. Like the fact that you sign Mbappe, give him all this money, and it's Mbappe who has to accommodate Vini, which is fine. I get it, but the fact that he goes missing for long periods from games, or we don't see him, he doesn't do the things that in modern football we usually expect from the skill players. Now, before the Vini fans get angry, Mbappe often doesn't do them either, right? And it just seems like a very un-Carlo type situation, having two of these guys on the team, if you know his background and his formation, and Saki and, Michael van Basten doing wind sprints and all this stuff, right? And yet, in the end, this is a low-scoring game. And the guy resolves games single-handedly more than once. Is it just a question of, I almost feel like, is it just a question of buying lottery tickets or buying scratch cards, and the Vini scratch card comes up good more often than others, and this is why you kind of always have to play him? Or
I think he's one of the best players in the world. So, I think he's got that in his locker. He still needs that freedom, I think, a bit of space. Like, I don't understand why Rodrigo De Paul is so far from him just before that free kick is taken by Modric on the goal, for example, because there's no reason for De Paul to be narrow and giving Vini a bit of space there, for example, because if you give him some space in the form that he is potentially, then he will hurt you. And that's what he did on the goal. Even if, again, I think there's still a lot of work for Militao to do. But yeah, I just love him. I think he's great. And yeah, sometimes he goes maybe a little bit too fine, how pumped he gets, especially away from home. And you saw his reaction when he got a corner from De Paul again in that second half. And you can just imagine, if you're an Atletico fan on that side of the pitch, how much you would go after Vini, really. And then with Koke too. So, and also Marcos Llorente at the end before he got taken off. I think that's also what makes him so special, and that's why you can't take that out of his game. Otherwise, you take a lot of his game.
I can live with that to some degree. It's just the fact that I when I watch it, I say you can do so much, but then off the ball, you do so little. And part of me says, this is mindset, right? The working off the ball.
But that's Ronaldinho, that's Mbappe, that's a lot of the players.
But that is the company he keeps, in your view, Ronaldinho and Mbappe.
Yeah. For me, that's the level. But this is what those guys do. You almost have to take in consideration when you build your team that they're not going to defend much. That's not what they do. And maybe if he was playing for another manager like a Pep or a club, maybe it'd be different. I don't know. But then you wouldn't want him to defend and waste energy when he's so good when he's on the ball with all that energy.
And the issue with Real Madrid, of course, is they have two guys like that.
Yeah.
Mbappe not there. Interesting, replaced by Modric, which I think totally makes sense as they went back to last year's setup, which also means Bellingham has more freedom. I thought Bellingham had a really, really good game. I mean, Vini, I would assume, would be Real Madrid's man of the match, or maybe Militao. But Bellingham, I thought, this was it. He showed up on a big night.
Yeah,
what did you make of the front? When you see this, do you get yourself saying, maybe they should be doing this?
No, I was disappointed about Rodrigo. That's it. Especially in the first half, where I think he hardly touched the ball. The second half, he had that big chance on the short corner that they had, and he just hit it over the bar. I just thought for Rodrigo, this is in this like whole debate about the front four, and at some point Bellingham, Rodrigo, Mbappe and Vini can't all play together in the big games for balance of the team, etc., etc. I think this was the game for Rodrigo to just score points in that kind of like mini table between all four of them in terms of importance, what they can do. And I don't think he did enough, really. So this is a game where you have to work hard, because Atleti makes you work so hard. This is not an enjoyable game, I think, if you're Bellingham or even Vini, all those guys. And I thought Bellingham worked really hard.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. This is kind of like the audition for playing time, because I think as the season progresses, either Mbappe returns and all of a sudden Mbappe and Vini says like, hey, we enjoy pressing and defending. But I don't think that's going to happen somehow.
No, yeah.
Otherwise, unless Rodrigo makes himself undroppable, he's the one who will get dropped.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into Arda Güler, Brahim when he returns. Maybe if Camavinga's fit, maybe it's even fit if Valverde on that side. Maybe it's a 4-4-2. I don't know what the setup's going to be.
Yeah.
But you cannot carry Rodrigo the way you carry
The other
you
two,
carry
no,
Vini
for
or Mbappe.
sure, yeah.
Atletico mixed things up as well. Now, this is a Simeone hallmark where he fiddles with his team.
Yeah.
I think probably more than any other manager of a big club in the world. I really struggle to think of anybody who does this. I mean, Pep does it a lot, but then big games, we have base formation.
Yeah.
So we saw Griezmann, the only living Sorloth in captivity, and Julian Alvarez all together with the back four, which I thought Marcos Llorente inside, which I thought actually put a lot of stress on the front three because it's almost like he made them really aware, okay, guys, you're all there together. So, I'm taking a big chance playing you guys. I want us to be aggressive, but also we can't concede. And I almost feel like they had their handbrake on. Certainly in that first half, I think there was the Alvarez shot. I thought Griezmann contributed very little.
Yeah, there was not much in it. Yeah, and I just don't think play Sorloth against Rudiger and Militao. This is the kind of players they love playing against. This is a Haaland type, tall guy.
But you have the little guys buzzing around them.
But still, you saw when Correa came on and on the goal, by the way, playing on their shoulders and having that threat of running in behind. By the way, I thought Real Madrid in the 95th minute, being quite higher up the pitch made no sense whatsoever either. But this is what Correa does. Solo would have not scored that goal, certainly not in that way. So I like the fact that if Cholo got it wrong in his starting 11, which I think is a thing, he got it right with his substitution. I mean, Javi Galan with the perfect
that was a
pass.
Tremendous pass.
Really good pass.
And I'm wondering, we're at the stage where he should be getting more space.
Maybe, yeah. But Samuel Lino had a good impact too when he came on. So there's a few things, and maybe the starting lineup was to make sure that you were just solid, and then after that you brought in a bit of flair. Maybe I just don't know. But in the end, his substitutions worked.
The suspension side of it, this is not something that we often see as fans throwing things. On the pitch. I think there's a couple points to make, right? First and foremost, the guys with the Mexican wrestler mask.
The balaclavas,
the balaclavas. You're in the stadium wearing a mask. Security gets you. You're out.
Yeah.
They should have very, very simple rules on this. You do not cover your face.
Yeah.
In the stadium. This is not like, I know people have this debate like, oh well, what if when we have public demonstrations on the streets and protests, should they be allowed to do it? One thing is expressing your free speech out on the streets in a public venue. Another thing is you're at the Civitas Metropolitano, which is Atletico Madrid Stadium.
Yeah.
You can have stadium rules. Say, for security, for whatever reasons, you are not covering your face, right? So I don't know if that guy was one of the ringleaders or whatever. The other thing, which is difficult, I think, for fans, maybe even here in the UK, but certainly across the pond in most parts of the world, is this notion that when they start throwing the items, Coque comes over, Simeone comes over, Jimenez, who then weirdly got water thrown on him.
Or beer.
Close to him. Yeah. It's obvious that they know these guys and they have a relationship.
They're your leaders, yeah.
Well, it's obvious for us because we're used to ultras culture and ultras culture having a relationship with players.
Yeah.
In Spain, there's a whole thing that goes back years where they throw these parties and invite them and whatever. There's a lot of people who say you should not have relationships at all with the ultras. You should treat them like any other fan. Where do you stand on this?
I thought more it was just the captain, and I suspect Jimenez might be vice captain too, and Simeone to come. I didn't expect Julian Alvarez, who just arrived at the club, or people like that, to come and speak to the ultras to say like calm things down.
But you agree that they spoke to them like they knew him. They're not doing
you're right.
It's obvious there's a pre-existing relationship.
I think so, and I think very often, certainly in France, in Italy, and in Spain, captains or vice captains go to end of season barbecues.
Right.
Parties thrown by ultra groups, and Mbappe, when he left PSG, the PSG ultras organized this big party for him. So I think this is quite common that you don't have here in England, but that you have in a lot more Latin countries, if you want, in Europe. So it's always this way, the line, where you draw the line between the ultras and the club overall and players too. What's acceptable, not acceptable. Not all ultras are bad, but some, as we know, as we've seen, are not very good either. So yeah, but I guess having a relationship with them, does that help you last night to calm things down or not?
This is the argument, and I don't quite know where the answer is, because you can say maybe it does help them, but equally they know that what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
They're kind of making it about themselves and not about, the other 50,000 Atletico fans who were there. So it kind of works both ways. And obviously we've seen in the past ultras doing pretty sinister things. I mean, there's a famous case at Real Madrid. This is going back sort of 15, 20 years, where they would invite players to these barbecues that we talk about, and then the players who didn't come, they would boo them, put pressure on them. So, and these barbecues were kind of money-making exercises because they would charge people to show up, but then you had to show up. Like, there's a whole dark side to this, which I think in many clubs has actually been successfully weeded out. But it does make you a little bit uncomfortable where, Coque walks up to people who are throwing crap at Courtois, and it's like, hey, my buddy, can you stop? Like, as if, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not having a go at Coque. He's been there forever. He probably grew up with some of these guys, right? The following on from this, well, we agree the suspension, it's a weird protocol. Again, I think that could have been briefer.
Yeah.
Diego Simeone had something to say after the game about this.
So he went to see Courtois on the pitch as well.
Yes.
And you could see him say, I don't know, he has his thumbs up, but he looks a bit sarcastic in his face.
And
I
then
could
he
not
starts
read on his lips
as well.
Do you think he said to him, like, why did you... So Courtois reacted by turning around after the Militao goal towards the Ultras, him as a former Atletico Madrid player, and kind of like provoked a little bit, right?
Yeah. And then afterwards, in the press conference, he came out and he said, look, those guys, the Ultras are completely wrong. Nobody's justifying them. But we are also wrong, right? And he did the whole we. And he says, I'm not just talking about Courtois. I'm talking about me. I'm talking, because he's certainly wound fans up in the past many times. I'm talking about Vinicius. I'm talking about Messi. He wasn't even there, but whatever, right? But you get the point, right? Our behavior on the pitch, we cannot wind the fans up.
Yeah.
You know my thoughts on this? I've had many goes at Nico Jackson, among others, but it's not just telling. Remember Ruud van Nistelrooy machine gunning the opposition. I'm like, dude, like, from the safety of the pitch, and everybody's a big man, right? I think Courtois is literally a big man.
Really big.
I'm in two minds about this. I get his point more generally. It did feel like in that situation, Courtois going to the fans saying, bring it on. He's obviously not saying, bring it on, throw rocks at me. He's saying, bring it on, keep booing me. Which I think is kind of different than somebody shushing the crowd, which I absolutely hate, or whatever else. To me, it felt like, I'm a big fan of Charles. I've had the privilege of meeting him. I've known him for 20 years. For me, it felt like, let me spin this argument away from the behavior of my fans and the punishment we're likely to get, and spin it a little bit, spin the conversation towards Courtois.
Yeah. I think it felt like that a little bit. And even him going to see Courtois on the pitch before also felt a little bit like that.
Yeah. Now, obviously, weirdly, my television didn't have Courtois cam. So I don't know. We saw him make that gesture.
Yeah.
We don't know if he did something else.
No, true.
I'm sure pictures will emerge if it did happen.
Yeah.
But in this situation, I think Simeone should have just been like, all right, let's just move on. There's no circumstance where this ever happens.
Yeah.
But, I understand why he did it.